know how to actually wear one of these. Kind of to the side situation. Huh? Is this how it's supposed to go? Is this right as we're gonna get? Let's do it. Today we are going to be discussing the Emily in Paris canon timeline. What does this mean? Answering the question, or trying to, how long has Emily been in Paris? A lot of the times when you're talking about this show in the Emily in Paris canon timeline discussion, the reason that people want to have that discussion is, shouldn't she know more French by now? She's lived in Paris for blank amount of time. Some people seem to think that Emily's been in Paris for like a number of months. Some people think that Emily's been in Paris for a number of years and that each season is a year. Everyone is wrong, and no one seems to be talking about just how wrong everyone is. I rewatched the entire series several times. I took detailed note on any time anybody mentioned or made reference to the timeline. We're gonna talk about it. Obviously, spoiler alert for season 1 to season 4 of Emily in Paris. This video is being made right before season 5 comes out. Let's begin. Season 1, episode 1, the Cubs are going to the playoffs. So if the Cubs are going to the playoffs, that means that we are in late September, early October, sometime around this time. A lot of people in the world of the Emily in Paris timeline conspiracists like to talk about the fashion in the show. I'm not going to be doing that here. I find that the fashion in this show is far too sporadic and is used purely as a creative choice rather than anything trying to imply what time of year it is. That being said, in this episode, they are clearly trying to draw a comparison, making Chicago look cold and Paris look warm. We dunk down into Lake Michigan and then we come back up in the River Thames and it's suddenly really warm. Regardless, if we are starting the Major League Baseball playoffs, we are somewhere in this part of the year. It's also critical to note that Madeline, Emily's boss, finds out that she's pregnant in this episode. Season 1, episode 4. Again, I'm not gonna be talking about every episode, I'm just gonna be talking about the episodes where we learn something about the timeline. Now in this video, I'm gonna be talking about soft dates and hard dates. A soft date is like when Paris Fashion Week is. It might be this period of time in the real world, but we can imagine that in the Emily in Paris universe, it's in a different period of time. I'm also going to be talking about hard dates. In season 1, episode 4, we get our first hard date in the show. In this episode, Emily tries to make a restaurant reservation for August 11th, the date that we are told that it is in the show, but because she switches the month and the day, instead she makes it for November 8th. We are now told in one of the most clear-cut hard dates that we get in the show that it is August 11th. Already, this makes no sense. Why would the Cubs be going to the playoffs and then 4 episodes later, we are on August 11th? It's also worth mentioning that Emily calls out that Zimmer Paris is going to be opened around November 8th and that everybody at this dinner is going to come back to this hotel on November the 8th to celebrate. Season 1, episode 10, Paris Fashion Week. Season 1 ends with Pierre Cadieux debuting his new line of clothing at Paris Fashion Week. This arrow is supposed to show where we currently are as we're talking. Is that clear? Now, Paris Fashion Week in the real world is the last week of September. Season 1, episode 4 takes place on August 11th. I'm not mad about the fact that the finale would take place the last week of September. The problem is that doesn't make sense with what we know about the first episode, which also takes place around the end of September. Spoiler alert, inconsistencies like this are gonna happen all the time and we're not gonna get any explanation to them. Season 2, episode 1. See, we're already in season 2, we're moving and grooving. There's no actual timeline given for this episode, but it is worth noting that this season starts off immediately after the last season. At the end of season 1, Emily and Gabrielle sleep together and we are still dealing with the ramifications of that in this episode. In the Emily in Paris canon timeline community, there's a lot of conversation about time that we don't see, off-screen time. This show does a great job at outright telling us we are not missing off-screen time. There are not months in between, there's barely days in between, and if there is a period of time in between episodes, they tend to tell us. Season 2, episode 3, it's Emily's birthday. Now, they don't actually tell us exactly when this is, but I thought it was important to talk about in case later in the show they shout out her star sign or something like that. That way I can go back and know roughly what time of year this was. Now we're through the halfway point in season 2, and if you recall, we're somewhere in September and October, or at least our season started somewhere in September and October. Long story short, it should be getting cold soon. Wrong. Season 2, episode 7, there is a heat wave in Paris. It is 36 degrees Celsius, which is 97 degrees Fahrenheit. 97 degrees Fahrenheit, 36 degrees Celsius, somewhere here. That makes no sense. Now, between you and me, I think that the heatwave episode was just an excuse to get Emily into Alfie's apartment because he had air conditioning. But keep in mind, it is supposed to canonically be like October, November. For context, the temperature that they shout out in this episode matches the hottest temperature that has ever been recorded in Paris in September, which was in 2023. It reached 36 degrees Celsius. All of those reasons, I am implying that this episode jumps us back to July and August. It is just too hot of a temperature for it to be any of these later months of the year. Additionally, in a phone call, Madeline tells Sylvie that they can be ready to launch the Pelotec bikes in the fall, implying that it's not in the fall now. Season 2, episode 10, our finale. No timeline point is shouted out in this episode, but I once again want to put it on the board to illustrate that in between season 2, episode 10 and season 3, episode 1, we do not lose any time. In this episode, Sylvie has broken away to start her own company, and Emily is grappling between whether to stay with Madeline or to stay with Sylvie. And when season 3 starts up, we are still dealing with the exact same predicament. Season 3, episode 1, Madeline gives birth. Now, this is a fairly critical episode in the conversation of the Emily in Paris canon timeline. With the introduction of Madeline giving birth, we have a pretty clear, inarguable amount of time. In season 1, episode 1, Madeline finds out she is pregnant. She finds this out when the Cubs are going to the playoffs. In season 3, episode 1, Madeline gives birth. We are now roughly 8 to 9 months out from when Emily got sent to Paris. Now, disregarding anything else in all of this, the only way that Emily would have been in Paris for 8 to 9 months and not seen any kind of winter or holidays, which we learn about later in the show, is if she arrived in Paris around January to March, been there around 8 to 9 months, placing us now in the latter half of the year. The problem is, we know that isn't true, not just with a bunch of these soft dates, but with the hard date of August 11th that we know happened in season 1, episode 4. You might be asking yourself, well, when does this take place? When does Madeline giving birth take place? Well, in season 3, episode 2, we learn that it is solstice. That's right, June 21st. And it is also stated that Madeline gave birth 2 weeks prior. So season 3, episode 1 takes place on June 7th, since season 3, episode 2 takes place on June 21st, and it's stated that Madeline gave birth 2 weeks before. Don't ask me how, but somehow, as of season 3, we are both in June, and 8 to 9 months have passed since Emily arrived in Paris, having not experienced any kind of winter or holidays or anything like that. And in season 1, episode 4, it was August 11th. And what's very frustrating about this whole thing is that if Madeline gives birth on June 7th, it makes sense that she would have found out that she was pregnant roughly in September of the previous year. What's so annoying about this is that it feels like there was someone on the set of Emily in Paris who was like in charge of figuring out when Madeline was supposed to give birth, and that one person did their job. That one thing makes sense, but everything else in between doesn't make sense. Do you see why this could drive someone crazy? Do you see how this could drive someone to put a bunch of string on their wall? Moving on to season 3, episode 3, Sylvie has instructed the maintenance guy to try to get Emily and Madeline out of the building where she wants to have Agence Croteau, the building that we've seen them working in this entire time. And in the process of doing that, Madeline complains that the heat is on in the middle of summer. I'm placing this around late June, early July, just because of what we already know about the earlier episodes in season 3 taking place in the middle of June. Moving right along, we're jumping to season 3, episode 6. Now, this episode takes place on Antoine's lavender farm, and in the episode, the lavender is in full bloom. Lavender is in bloom from mid-June to mid-August. So because 3 episodes before, it was like late June, early July, I put this episode around the beginning of August. This is kind of a rough marker, but just in general, we are in late summer. So the final timeline note that we get in season 3 is this, being on the lavender farm. We can assume that that's roughly in the beginning of August. There's 4 more episodes after that, so I'm going to put our current timeline marker at end of August, early September, with where season 3 is ending. Now, in season 3, episode 10, the wedding between Camille and Gabrielle gets disrupted because Camille runs out because she thinks that Emily is in love with Gabrielle. All kinds of drama ensues. Season 4, episode 1 starts up again, and we are still dealing with the ramification of those things. It is stated in season 4, episode 1 that it has only been 3 days since the wedding. So, as a reminder, we end season 3 here, and then when season 4 starts up, there is no major time jump. So, where does season 4 begin? Season 4, episode 1 takes place at the Roland Garros French Open, which takes place, you guessed it, not in the fall, but in late May, early June. I look like a crazy person, but I'm not a crazy person. I'm the only sane person, and this is crazy. I shouldn't have to tell you, this makes absolutely no sense. We ended our season 3 in late summer, early fall, and days later, we are at the Roland Garros. It is spring. Happy spring. I've become aware of this show's propensity to do what I'm calling a spring reset. What this means is that every so often when the show decides that it's convenient, it resets the timeline to late spring, early summer. The last time that we saw this was in the heat wave episode, in which canonically we should have been in the late fall, and yet suddenly we had a heat wave. We're seeing the same thing again. We were entering into a period of time in the year where it could have started to get cold. Now season 4 starts, and suddenly, we are here in the spring. What's frustrating is that after a spring reset, the show tends to be consistent for a little while. Like, after the spring reset at the end of season 2, as I said, season 3 was a pretty consistent timeline. But now, once again, we are resetting ourselves back to late spring, early summer. I'm worried that I'm gonna get a comment that I'm not wearing the beret right, and I think that will hurt because they're right. Season 4, episode 2, Emily finds Camille at the Muséum de la Orangerie, surrounded by water lilies, specifically Monet's water lilies, specifically the pink hardy water lily is shown in this scene. Now, the pink hardy water lily has a really long bloom time. It can bloom anywhere from June to September, but it's generally in peak bloom around June, July, and August. So I'm going to move our timeline to roughly being here back in the middle of summer. This jump from May, June to June, July with one episode of difference is not that crazy. The problem is, where does that time come from? As I've said before, one episode ends and the next episode starts pretty immediately after the last one ends. I will call out any major area for time jump that we have in this show, but this show really doesn't give us any. At season 4, episode 1, we find out that Camille is missing. In season 4, episode 2, we are doing the search for Camille, and she isn't gone for that long. The timeline order here is correct, but I don't know where the time is going. Not only are we not shown that off-screen time, but there's not really anywhere for it to go. Everything that we're seeing takes place in the immediate aftermath of the stuff we've already seen. Season 4, episode 1 and season 4, episode 2 are not that crazy of a timeline discrepancy, at least in isolation. Obviously, like everything else in the show, completely off from everything else that we've seen. Season 4, episode 5, it's fall. I've said before that you can't take fashion in this show as an indication of timeline, because if you do it in one place, you have to do it in every place, and everything just breaks down. That being said, in this episode, the presence of fall jackets is so prevalent that it felt irresponsible not to mention it. For kind of the first time in this entire show's run, everyone is dressed in these big fall jackets and everything feels really fall. It's worth noting that in this episode, several water fountains appear on, like public fountains, and in Paris, a lot of public fountains are turned off in November for the start of winter. Because a lot of fountains in this episode appear on, I'm going to put us in October, presumably around late October, because it does look pretty cold, but not in November because the fountains haven't been turned off yet for the winter. Season 4, episode 6, there's no way to avoid it. It's Christmas. This episode is what spawned my desire to look at the Emily in Paris timeline in the first place. Now, when taken in isolation in season 4, the Christmas episode being here doesn't feel far off. In the previous episode, like I said, there were lots of big fall jackets. Now, fast forward and it's Christmas. This additionally doesn't feel that weird because this is one of the only times in the show where we jump forward an undetermined amount of time. There's no reference to how long ago the previous episode was in this episode. All we're told is that it's now Christmas. This also makes sense because season 4 was released in 2 parts. Part 1 was episodes 1 through 5, and part 2 was episodes 6 through 10. So having a bit of a break in between the 2 episodes makes sense. There is an understandable gap here in between episode 5 and episode 6 that could make sense that it's Christmas. What is perplexing about this episode, though, is that it is made unavoidable to us that this is Emily's first Christmas since she's moved to Paris. We know this because in the episode she says that she's finally flying back to Chicago, implying that she hasn't been back to Chicago for anything, including the holidays. It's also made very clear to us that she has never spent the holidays or a winter in Paris. She's asking Mindy about this party that she throws every year. She's asking Gabrielle if it ever snows in Paris. It's made very clear to us in the writing that this is Emily's first time experiencing winter. This is nonsensical, Obviously. At the very least, we have a time jump of 8 to 9 months between season 1, episode 1, when Madeline finds out she's pregnant, and season 3, episode 1, when she gives birth. We are also told in season 1, episode 4, that it is August 11th at this time. It is inarguable, even with the perpetual state of summer that we have been in this show, that Emily needs to have experienced some kind of holidays. The problem is, when? This show both bleeds chronologically, meaning that we're constantly losing time, but also goes out of its way to tell us that we don't have any major time jumps, with the exception of season 4, episode 5 to season 4, episode 6. It's also worth noting that we see Alfie in this episode at church with a new girlfriend that he presumably has gotten since the last time we saw him in season 4, episode 3. All of this implies that season 4 takes place over a huge amount of time. We start the season in season 4, episode 1 with Emily and Alfie kissing at Roland Garros. Now it's 5 episodes later, Alfie has a new girlfriend, which presumably is very serious because he's meeting her parents, which we know that Alfie doesn't do. What's frustrating about all of this is that as a fan, I was okay with Emily's world existing exclusively from about late spring to early fall. That was fine with me. In the same way that Gilmore Girls is perpetually in fall, I was okay with the fact that Emily in Paris takes place perpetually in summer. But the show's desire to give us wintry episodes in season 4 forces us as fans to reckon with the fact that Emily's reality does include winter and it does include holidays. This is the reason why so many fans were jarred by the Christmas episode. Not only were we suddenly faced with the fact that seasons exist in this show, which despite the fact that we've been in Paris for a while, we've never really seen, but we're also forced to reckon with the fact that this is the first time that she has experienced winter, implying that she has been in Paris for well under a year because we have never seen any of the colder months and she has been there for at least 9 months. I gotta chill out, man. I gotta calm down. This sweater's hot. I gotta... Season 4, episode 7 starts off with Emily and Mindy discussing the events of the previous episode. It's really clear that not a lot of time has passed. Emily also greets Gabrielle and Camille by saying Happy New Year, which means we can assume that we are about here in the first few weeks of January, which makes this the longest piece of string I've had to cut so far. So okay, our timeline is kind of on track. We had a fall episode, we had a Christmas episode, now we have an episode that takes place in January. We're good, right? Wrong. Season 4, episode 8 takes place at a polo match, specifically Marcello and Nico's polo match, Italy versus France, which means that we are now in the French polo season, which takes place in between April and September, meaning that we can safely assume we're somewhere here. Huh? Where's my tape? Where's my tape? I lost my tape. Hypothetically, this would be a huge time jump of several months. The problem is, as per usual, we're still discussing the same things that we were in the previous episode. Emily is talking to Mindy about what she's going to do with her gig at the Crazy Horse. Nico is still potentially going to take over from his father and is figuring out what he's going to do about that. Our timeline in one episode, despite the fact that clearly no time has passed, has jumped from January all the way to April or May. We have another spring reset in season 4, despite the fact that we just had one at Roland Garros. To reiterate, we had Roland Garros at the beginning of season 4 in the spring. Then we had Christmas. Now we're back in the spring for polo season. Huh? Now, the function of this is to enable us to have these beautiful, warm shots of Rome. Because next episode, spoiler alert, we go to Rome with Marcello, very handsome, very dreamy. And we want life in Rome to look warm and sunny and beautiful, so we've jumped back to a spring reset. Back, forward, I have no idea. All I know is that we want it to be warm, and so now it's warm. Moving on to season 4, episode 9, we are driving around the Colosseum on a Vespa with Marcello. Everything's beautiful, everything's bright, the flowers are in bloom. It is clear that our spring reset has stuck, and we can imply that we are now in about May or June. I made this very official Emily in Rome sign to put over this, but you can't even read it, so just pretend that says Emily in Rome, if you could. Finally, season 4, episode 10, we look out our beautiful new apartment in Rome. We are now in Rome. Now, there's no hard dates given in this episode, but it is important to mention that Agence Crateau, specifically Emily, has been put on a 6-month probationary period working with Moratori in Rome. I don't know if this will be relevant when season 5 comes out, but I wanted to mention it. Everybody in my life has been like, Sam, maybe they just didn't put that much thought into it. Maybe they just wanted to have a cute Christmas episode. Well, some of us care. So how long has Emily been in Paris? The show kind of makes it impossible to say. Logically, I would tell you that about 2 years of events have transpired. That being said, we're dumped into this world in late summer, early fall in season 1, have months and months pass, then have our Christmas episode in season 4. Emily's world exists in a Groundhog Day style of unstable chronology that will flash back to late spring, early summer, at any time. One wants to assume that the show just exists in perpetual warmth, but then the Christmas episode forces us to reckon with the reality of temporal chronology and the existence of winter. This is why the winter episodes felt so jarring to so many of us after 4 seasons. If you take the show at face value, just accepting all of the spring resets and all of the weirdness as canon, you can assume that Emily's been in Paris for about 10 to 11 months, having arrived in around August, having experienced her first Christmas and winter there, and now having it be springtime, roughly late summer. Still, that forces us to reckon with a reality in which season 1, episode 1 to season 4, episode 6 took place in a period of about 5 months in between roughly August and roughly December. I'll also remind you that in about half of that period that we're talking about, Madeline was able to gestate and give birth to a baby. All of this is to say, I have no idea how long to tell you that Emily has been in Paris. All of this is a disaster. At the time of recording this video, season 5 comes out in a few weeks. I am very excited both to see season 5 and to get some more information about what's going on with all of this. If anyone knows anyone who works on Emily in Paris who might have some kind of answer to all of this, please let me know. I would love to know. 10 more seasons. 10 more seasons. Maybe we'll get a second Christmas. Maybe if we do 10 more seasons, we'll get a second Christmas. So that's it. Thanks for watching and au revoir. I don't speak French. I don't have a good French accent. Darren Star, I just want to talk. Okay, I don't want to yell. I just want to talk. You and me, I just want to have a conversation. I just want to sit down and talk all this out. I just want to talk it out.